Welcome back, everyone. I told you today would be worth watching, right? Right, I can't hear you, but I know you're all cheering at home, and we have so much more set for you for the rest of the day. Next is an amazing session about the very popular genre of unscripted TV. Here to co-moderate this session are two legends of unscripted TV, Phil Gurin of the Gurin Company and Bruce David Klein from Atlas Media. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I want to say at the top, we really look forward to seeing you next year live and in person at NATPE in Miami. But for right now, we have hopefully a fun panel here being moderated by myself and my very good friend and often debating partner, Phil Gurin. I will, start by saying, I've been recently thinking about the old expression, may you live in interesting times. And actually,
it's a curse. It's actually a curse.
Exactly. Sometimes it's used as a positive thing, but actually the history is more, it's a Chinese curse that, may you live in interesting times. It's ironic. And I've been thinking about it, obviously, because in many ways it does capture kind of what everyone's feeling right now, especially in the industry. We're dealing with, major disruption of the media landscape. We're dealing with changing cultural trends. We're dealing with the pandemic and obviously political instability. So it's certainly interesting times. And I think the question for this panel at this moment really is going to be divided, as Phil and I kind of decided, in two parts. Where are we now and what's next? And, so really it's about during these interesting times, what are we all up to? How are we faring? What do we think's next? What are viewers telling us? What are network buyers telling us? I can have Phil kind of fill in the blanks and really start us off by introducing our illustrious panel.
And thank you, Bruce. And we're all excited to gather. And I want to just echo, we're thankful that we have such a wonderful panel here remotely, but hopefully next year we will all be together again in person, sharing a glass and sharing some fun times as well. Let me just jump right in and start introducing people. Forgive me as I dip my head down to read. We have Tim Crescenti, who, along with his lovely wife, Colleen, founded Small World IFT in 2005 with the goal to make the world a better place through the power of television. Tim has brought the world such global hits as Dragon's Den, also known as Shark Tank from his Sony days, and something that is near and dear to my heart as well. I Survived the Japanese Game Show, Silent Library, and Better Late Than Never on NBC. This made history as the first South Korean format to be adapted in the US and adapted into 12 other countries. There's a lot of other things that Tim is into. We'll get to that as we go. Elaine Frontain Bryant joins us. She is also on the NATPE board with Bruce and myself, and we try to plan a lot of these reality events. Elaine's been at A&E Networks for 16 years as head of programming for both history and A&E. She's responsible for commissioning some of the biggest and innovative hits in cable: Storage Wars, Duck Dynasty, Curse of Oak Island, Forged in Fire, Leah Remini's Scientology in the Aftermath, Live PD. We also have joining us Rachel Job, SVP of non-scripted content at All3 Media International. Rachel works with both All3 Media Group companies and third-party independent producers to identify and acquire content for international distribution and co-production. Previously, Rachel was director of programming at A&E Networks for History and H2 channels in the UK and EMEA. We have joining us also Frank Sinton, is the COO of Tinopolis, USA, and president of A. Smith & Company Productions Docs Division, dedicated to documentary and factual programming. He's the award-winning producer behind Welcome to Plathville on TLC, the BET Plus original American Gangster Trap Queens, and 7 NAACP Image Award-winning series Unsung on TV1. He's also worked on such shows as Hell's Kitchen and American Ninja Warrior. And lastly, Laura Michalchyshyn is the Chief Creative Officer and Co-President of Content for Blue Ant Studios, where she oversees content creation and development across multiple businesses with Blue Ant Media. She manages the company's production arm in Blue Ant. Let me do that one again. She co-manages the company's production arm, Blue Ant Studios, which operates businesses in the US, Canada, Singapore, and New Zealand, and is currently exec producing key projects, including the recent hit Canada's Drag Race. Thank you guys, one and all. What an illustrious panel. Bruce, want to start the questioning?
Yeah, I mean, I think we start with kind of a broad look at kind of how are we all faring? Where are we now? What are network buyers telling us for the producers, and what are viewers telling us? Elaine, what are your viewers telling you now, do you think?
So, the world at large is certainly, the news is drawing most viewers. Add that to, we lost one of our biggest shows this year. It's been a time where we're rebuilding viewership in this moment. So this moment in January 2021 is something of a challenge, but I would say that viewers want, the same kind of involvement that they're not getting from the news channels, so escapism, happens in many different ways. And it can be from crime programming, it can be from like this clip show type programming, it can be documentary, and it can be much lighter fare than A&E tends to offer. But we're there, we're in a rebuilding phase as a brand, as a network already, and then hit with just people watching the news. It's been a challenging time, but we're making it.
That's a buyer's perspective. What about a seller's perspective? Who wants to take that?
I'm happy.
I'll jump.
Yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
jump.
We all have
Okay.
something to say.
Yeah, look, I think for us, the world has changed dramatically. And I think you said it well, we're in very interesting times, which is both a blessing and a curse. But from our perspective, in terms of what we develop, really hasn't changed in many ways. The logistics of what we do has changed dramatically, obviously with COVID and all the protocols. But in terms of the type of programming, we're always about trying to have shows with purpose, things that mean something, the variety, and I think all of the things that people liked before, whether it's big game shows, competition shows, documentaries, those still, the good ones still work. They still will work. So I think for us, it's more of a logistical challenge than an audience challenge. I think people still like what they want. Obviously, everybody's consumed with the news, as you said, Elaine. But when they need a break, there's still that variety, and we're just still looking for things that excite us. And what worked before, I think will still work and will work again. So that's our take.
What were you going to say, Laura? You had a point.
Well, I think for us on the production side, and thanks, I totally agree with Frank. I think on the production side too, we had to deal with a total, mostly complete international shutdown of production. So I'm sure my colleagues on this, esteemed panel will talk about how we all have to learn to manage, via Zoom, Google Meet, Team, like it just in less than, 24 hours, our world changed immensely. But the good news, in light of all of the, obvious challenges, is that there are parts of the world, including in the US, where production is happening. We're learning every day. How do we pivot? What do we need to do to make it safe for our crews, for our talent? And really, it's all about the partnership. So I have to say, my days have gone from 12-hour days to like 20-hour days, because, you're always communicating and making sure. Where you'd be in an office previously, it's like, have we checked in? But we're excited because we've actually, the one thing is access to people like Elaine has become that much easier. It's a lot easier to talk to each other. So we're excited about the fact that we've had an 8 to 10 month heavy development period. All of our teams, and agreed that there are some things that we were developing before and we're continuing. But I'm excited about the new opportunities and the new partnerships and relationships. We just got a green light on Canada's Drag Race in the middle of a pandemic, which, for a company like us that's emerging and growing internationally is a huge deal. And I said last week, the day after Wednesday, it's kind of a nice announcement to be making, that we're celebrating diversity, the LGBTQ community, and, and joy. So
Well, congratulations on that. But you know what you just meant?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Bruce, I'm sorry. Talking about co-productions, both Rachel and Tim know a lot about deal with that as well. And I'd be interested to hear from your perspectives about how co-production, has it evolved? Has it changed because of the world we've just lived through? How has it impacted you in the co-production world?
I mean, if I'll go first if that's okay. I think co-production has always been and probably should be not the default position. I think we all want shows made by one broadcaster, one network, and that network controls that show, controls the editorial. But what co-production does do is it helps make a difficult show to finance and helps make it happen. And it's a sort of commercial solution. So I suppose this year, there's been a lot of focus on getting shows in production. And from our point of view, at the beginning of the year, just like everywhere else, everything stopped. And suddenly our supply line for global distribution stopped. So it's like, how can we get that back up and running? By the end of June, we had probably 50 hours coming through because let's face it, non-scripted is super nimble. Like I've got colleagues who work with scripted content and they were still scratching their heads around how they get around restrictions, where our guys are out there with sort of self-shooters and all sorts. So I think in that respect, I think non-scripted, we are best placed to kind of move very quickly. But on the co-production side, I think people are definitely more willing to come together and compromise. But Tim can talk about co-production sort of on the production side a lot more, but there's a lot of working together that has to be done. But I think people's appetite has definitely grown this year for it, for sure.
Yeah, I think from Rachel said, it used to be people in, not that we're in a business where there are large egos, but people would want to have control over everything. They want to have total IP, and everything went out the window in the last year. People say we've got to figure out a way to work together, whether it's co-productions, whether it's sponsorship. You saw that Fox show they announced with Pepsi, competition show. All of a sudden, there's new opportunities rather than just co-productions. But we are certainly seeing it. And then also too, a bit to what Laura said, you feel like you need a Ouija board at times because we've had two shows in sitting in the Middle East with NBC that have just been stagnant for a year. All of a sudden last week, we get the word, everything's opened up. We go, oh, great. So now we've got to shift to, let's start doing production meetings. And so it's, it is the blessing and the curse. What Frank had said, it's, you read the K7 reports and the WIT reports, and the Unscripted section is endless, which you go, this is fantastic. Being the old school guy, when the old days with 3 networks, we have got endless opportunities, and especially in the international side point. I think also too, addressing another thing with the escapism, you look at all the networks and what they're doing, everything old is new again. I don't know how many more shows ABC can reboot. We were just talking to somebody about the Groucho, the old Groucho Marx show, and they didn't even know about this person in the Middle East. And I said, I'm sure somebody somewhere is trying to reboot the Groucho Marx show. But
you bet your life.
You bet your life. You bet your life. I am kicking myself. I will make a confession. When Mass Sanger came to me 3 years ago, and through Craig Plessis and Steve Ball, they said, hey, we want to get the rights to the show. I go, you out of your freaking mind? How the hell are we going to do the show?
We all passed. We all passed on it, Tim. Everybody passed.
Yeah. So we got the deal for them in the US from NBC because they were already down the line with another production company. And there was that time where I should have taken the international rights, but who would have thunk that years later, people would they just want to escape. They don't want to think. They don't want to answer questions. They just want to watch these goofy costumes and laugh and entertain. So
that's only part of the business, right? That's the entertainment part.
Yes.
Right? The factual, how has it impacted factual and docs is another area to talk about because there's so many different ecosystems here.
One of the things that interests me is that in many ways, and I've talked about this with a whole bunch of people, we're kind of in this age of the franchise, big, successful, repeatable show brands that, give the gift of spin-offs and sequels, and these tried and tested franchises really seem to be more in demand than ever. And again, we're always a hit-driven business. So are we too much focusing on these big swings? I mean, it just seems like it is so difficult, we all know, to launch a franchise from scratch these days, but are we trying too hard to create them? Do sometimes kind of these massive hits come from unlikely places? Should we be spending more development time and money on these unlikely places? I remember for many years, Elaine at A&E, you know, the big question in the industry was always, who's the next dog? Who's the next dog? The bounty hunter. And, you know, I kept saying, you know, well, the next dog is not going to be a dog. You know, maybe it's a cat. It's something we don't even know. Are we placing too much emphasis on, we got to go big, we got to go the biggest possible, loudest possible way? And are we losing along the way some of these little gems that suddenly percolate up and become the next dog?
Well, look, I think that's a great question. And, you know, the moment I'm in with this brand in particular is, how do we lean back into what people want to watch right now while we're rebuilding for the next big one? You know, and this brand has always been built on innovation and like finding the unexpected. So I wasn't looking for a Scientology show when I did Leah Remini. I wasn't looking for a live policing show when Live PD happened, or 60 Days In, a jail show. But I knew that all of these subjects had some moment, yeah, like some, you know, kernel of what was gonna fire people up. So that's what, you know, that's a challenge for me, talking to producers, but also frankly inspiring my team, because we have to keep the lights on, right? So we're buying shows that we know are people going to watch, and that are that have a floor, right? So they're a subject level that people know. There's things we know. How do we keep reaching for that, you know, in this weird day? And you know, that's what we're looking for. Like it's harder to innovate. It's innovating off of things that have already come is what needs to happen, right? So like everything's been told. It's that, whatever, that Greek story of like, there's only, I'm gonna, you know, bastardize this, but only 8 stories, and you know, we all retell them different ways. It's kind of that. I can't believe I just said that on a panel, but I'm gonna say it. And it's like, you know,
Thanks for sharing your secret.
you haven't really heard a story that hasn't been there, but it's told by a different person. It's told in a different job. It's told by this. I never, as a, you know, as somebody who buys for a brand, I never say, gosh, bring me what TLC is doing that works. I say, there's something in that thing that can be translated to work for us in terms of a ticking clock, a real world mashup, a real world social experiment. That's what excites me and inspires me, and inspires me, and we can all build off each other that way, because it doesn't mean we're just copying each other. It means we can just build off each other. And that's, you know, so the next dog, you know, it's been a long time since character tapes came our way. We've really been figuring out formats and things that say something about the world, that are just I don't know, amazing worlds to live in. And then the character just is there or they're not. I don't know if that's an answer. It's a ramble.
I would only add to that, I think to that point, and my mentor and sometimes love, Paul Gilbert at Sony, we also used to say now at CBS, it's using the baseball analogy. So, sorry, Rachel. The American baseball analogy, you know, it's great to hit the home run, but boy, if you can get, it's a great business hitting doubles. If you can get that volume, we've restructured our business in the last year by shows that are, we focus more on fish out of water type shows, like the Better Late Than Never thing. And you put all this energy into a show that might get 2-3 seasons, 8 episodes at most each season, and it's done. And then you add in the COVID stuff. Nobody can travel. They can't do a season 3 on this because you can't send them anywhere. So we are revisiting the shows that are the volume studio-based type shows. Still has the kind of feel that we have, but yeah, I would love to, you know, it's great to have that, a show like that, an arcing show. You get 2-3 seasons and it's a network show, but gosh, if you can get that you know, the Wheel of Fortune, that you're getting 195 episodes a year and it's in 25 countries, that's a better business for us to be in. And we're scrappy. We're not Fremantle or Endemol Shine or whatever they're called nowadays.
Let me pose this question. Don't you all feel, with the plethora of platforms, whether it's broadcast, cable, streamer, or the competition, video games and other things that are competing for your eyeballs' attention, do you not feel you have to be loud to be heard? Can you still have what we would have called a programmer anymore? Do programmers work? Or because there's such ruthless competition, you have to just be swinging for the fences?
I'm the only person that can answer that, right?
Well, what you can, but we all hear
I mean, Laura
buyers too.
can. from
Yeah,
David
I was
Stewart.
Everybody
a
hears the
programmer
buyers
for
because we all
17
pitch.
years.
Everybody pitches other buyers too. But yeah, Laura.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you do, Phil. That's a really good point. I think, and we do need programmers, absolutely. Like I think even as much as they'll say Netflix isn't a brand, they're a brand. They're a brand. I mean, and I think, we'd be foolish to say Ted Sarandos isn't a programmer, because he is. So just as Elaine is. I think what's really interesting is, I think in line with what everyone else on the panel has said, I also think it's a time of talent. And we have to also, it's diversifying our portfolios, because, as for us and our company, which is really emerging and growing, we've said we will happily do the 4-packs and the 6-packs, but let's do it with talent. Let's do it with people who are going to be the next gen, big producers of big franchises. And I think I like saying the work I do is also talent and portfolio management. For every, franchise that we want to be developing, I do want to find that director who might have won an Emmy and, an IDA award, could be nominated for something in the future, because he is going to be someone that in 5 years, everyone's want to be in business with. So I like talking to programmers, buyers who have kind of a sense of their brand, but also understand the deeper dive of what it is developing, kind of a plethora of ideas. So I think it's a very important role. And I actually think the businesses that say we don't have programmers and we don't curate content are frankly not telling the truth, because they are.
I agree completely, Laura. I mean, for us, my favorite thing to do is sit down with a programmer and try to understand what they're looking for. And, whether, one of our biggest hits is a show on TV One, Unsung, which has been on for 11 years. But, we're also on NBC or Fox. So it's like, I think the networks and A&E is a great example that understand their audience and have a brand and know what they're looking for us to develop with that in mind. When we get a project through the door, to say, oh, this is great for that network or that network, I think it still matters. And I think so much of the success of a show is the right fit. It is hard to break through, but if you get that perfect marriage of the right show and the right network at the right time, that's when that magic can happen. Because to Tim's point about the Masked Singer, who knew, right? We never know where the next hit's coming from, but if you get that perfect fit, that's when there's a good chance for that magic to happen.
Well, as soon as you saw Mr. Robot, you knew that was going to be a hit, right? The robot costume. One thing that we're obviously all involved in intensely is development. And, there have been a lot of gripes, I think, in the last year in particular, that the cost of development, both for a production company as well as for networks, has in some ways become unsustainable. It used to be, I think everybody has the sense that there used to be a higher yield. If you developed 100, 10 would maybe get, pilot or sizzle orders, and maybe 1 or 2 would become series. That ratio has obviously become much more dire over time. How is everybody dealing with development costs and keeping them efficient and finding new ways to do development? Because I do think that this is going to be, certainly in the next couple of years, even more and more as the industry gets squeezed, those who can cleverly, smartly, and cheaply develop a lot of stuff that with a high yield will be kind of in the best position.
Actually, I'm going to dive in from a sort of global sort of distribution angle, because I think that just to sort of loop 2 points together, I think the sense of what are the networks, what are the streamers, do we have programmers that are really focused? I think if anything, people are becoming more niche and more focused and clearer about what they're asking for, but it does mean you have to almost develop a show completely differently for each buyer. You can't sort of think, well, if I work this up, at least I've got 3 places I can take it, or template. You know, it's kind of the only person I can take it to is through Elaine, for example. So, you know, what we're trying to do is support our producers by actually funding development ourselves, with a view that then we may then have a piece of the pie when it comes to international distribution. And obviously the US model, work for hire model, doesn't work so well. I mean, it's not entirely that model for everybody, but it does. But certainly internationally, UK, Australia, beyond, it's not a work for hire model. So, and to be honest, quite often we've funded shows for Raw and some of our other production companies, and they've gone on and been commissioned by Netflix, and we've gone, you know, that's fine. You've got a great show out of that. You've got an order. Just give us our little development money back, and that people are very happy to do that because they've just had a show bought. And actually, so we're kind of in that ecosystem as well, in a way that you wouldn't expect us to be. But I completely can see how difficult it is for guys that are producing at the moment.
I think you make a really great point, though. The days where you would develop a show and take it out to maybe 6, 7, or 8 buyers, completely over. Right now, our metric is always, if you have a show for 8 buyers, you don't have a show at all. It's not specific enough, right? But if you have a show for 1 or 2, maybe 3, because there will be enough platforms out there for those 3, then that becomes something worth developing. But something that's so broad, not specific enough to channels with the identities.
Yeah, I mean, it really went from, you know, male development and female development, you know, in the old days of cable, where you would have, you know, History, Nat Geo, Discovery would be one group, and then you would have, you know, Lifetime and We and TLC or whatever would be another group. And I think exactly what you're saying, the narrowness of it then became, well, they only do 18 to 34-year-old females. Then it became beyond demographics. We're looking for things that celebrate basic values. We're looking for things that shake up, you know, I mean, it's become so specific.
Well, I would speak back to that. You know, as a buyer who has been surprised, every single thing that I bought was never what I looked for, although there was a cohesiveness of a brand about, you know, authentic storytelling and dramatic documentary and all of that, right? When we give remits like this, you know, to go, oh, now they're asking for pro-social or something, I would just speak back to that and lovingly to you and respectfully, like, you ask for that all the time. You just didn't even say A&E in that because we're broad enough to be male and female. Here's who we are, you know? And so that's the challenge. Like, you know, the streamers, and yeah, Netflix might have a brand. I don't see it. I get a queue and I get this, and this is not to tear down Netflix. This is as cable tries to keep a brand, and I'm, you know, that person, one of them. It's very hard because we give a clear remit, which we hate because we give it to that, you know, agents, and then it's totally bastardized out to everybody else. And it's like, that is not what I said at all, but come talk to me. Like, that's the challenge that we have, especially now. So it's like, how much do you give? How much do you not give? It's, you know, I appreciate that. You can't make a tape. I'm not on that side of, you got to make a tape for all these people. That makes sense. And I'm in the middle, which is, I see a tape. It's not right for me. Could we make it like this? If you don't sell it somewhere else, can we adapt it for what works for us? Any good buyer is like that. And I know it's on your side to figure that out and use your resources wisely, but a good buyer will adapt with you. And also, we shouldn't be like, oh, now it's this. Like, that is to help you. You know what I mean? So I just lovingly say that back to my friend Bruce. Is that
okay? But so let's pick up, Elaine. So let's pick up on that topic. So let's have everybody. Really? No one's watching this,
really,
right? So no one's watching this. It's
We're
just
speaking
us,
into the void.
Nobody's paying attention to anything we're going to talk about. So let's reveal trade secrets. What is everybody developing for the next? Let's go to the future now, because we're moving forward in our panel here. What are you going to be looking to buy? What are you, Tim, looking to find? What are you guys looking to develop? What's the next? What are we going to see that's different, or are we going to see more of the same? Tell us something specific to each one of your companies so we can make some news. Reveal a little something about each one.
I can't do that.
Oh yeah, you can. Or just
You're
make
gonna
it
get
up.
us all fired, Phil.
Hell
Come on.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, what?
I'm an indie. I don't care.
You
What's
know,
coming down the pike? Tell
I'll
me
give you a
what.
little dinky nugget. I'm sorry. Did I step on your
Prognosticate.
toes?
Go ahead. Okay, Elaine, I'm sorry.
I'll just say this, because we've talked about a trend of what's old is new, right? We are looking at some of the things that have worked in the past for us, but how do we innovate? Because this brand is always about about an innovation, and it's always, kind of spoken to the moment we're in. Maybe that's what I say to myself, but I think that Born This Way wouldn't have just been done. It was an early diversity play. LIPD, said a lot about transparency of policing, and a few things that we've done have mattered a lot that way for us. So what we're trying to do is, how do you go classic and innovate in a way that, that anchors people and is a comfort for people, but also tells a story that's resonant for today. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's good.
And I think Elaine's right on. And I think for us, it's also, I'm fascinated. I have team members who are like listening to every iPod, it's IP. It's also like who's making, writing, creating content that maybe we hadn't thought of before, adapting into whether it's a format, an ongoing doc series, a factual series, a lifestyle, whatever. Like I'm talking to the 20-year-olds on my team. What are you watching? What are you listening to? What podcasts are you following? Because I don't have time in my day, but I have team members who somehow have time. So that's what's great, is also, I think we're going to be going down paths of some really interesting IP that we would never have considered, because it's not a platform that we're necessarily developing in, but we're going to take it over.
That's great.
Yeah, we're sort of doing the same thing as Laura just said. I mean, we found, just to give a general example, not too specific, but we found an incredible talent from Africa, and he's somebody found on a TED Talk. Just lights up the screen. And to your question earlier about costs of development, in the COVID world, we were able to do a pitch with a guy from South Africa on existing tape with a New York network. The only problem, Phil, was we had to do it at 7 a.m. which wasn't great for us in LA. But in pre-COVID world, we probably would have flown him out, done a sizzle tape, set up meetings in New York. It would have been $50,000 to $75,000 potentially, where now we were able to do it in a Zoom meeting and get potentially an offer within hours of that meeting, because he's so great. So
Did I say
for
that?
us, not yet. This is all hypothetical, Elaine.
Okay,
In the
good.
world of but it is an advantage that we live in this world. I'm really curious to see post-COVID if we can still pitch things that way, or if the expectation reverts back to what it was.
Do we all go back post-COVID to driving to people's offices, or
Right. That is the question.
or have we become so comfortable with
I don't think so.
the excessive?
I think it's gonna be a
the way.
hybrid. I think it's gonna be a
I do too.
hybrid.
Yeah.
It's just so efficient, I think, for somebody certainly like Elaine that needs to do a lot of these in a week, I would guess.
It's fatiguing though. I found, I'm sorry, I don't want to move, subjects, but like I found like I'm at a COVID fatigue in terms of inspiring a team, in terms of finding creativity. This is hard chronically. And so I miss the flying to London to see Rachel, or, having drinks with y'all, at the Soho House in LA or something like that. Like those are the things that will be special and smaller, but I think business can be done, the way we've been doing it.
Yeah, and I will say either way, if we go back to the old way or keep this, either situation, I still will refuse to wear pants or trousers. So I think
Happy in shorts.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim, you spend how many normally weeks on the road a year? You're emailing me from Korea and Saudi Arabia and whatever. I mean, how is your business going to change, do you think?
Well, it drastically has changed. We announced this deal with an MGM First Look deal in the summer, and we were talking about it before COVID. And based on the premises you just said, Bruce, of me always being some strange place and boots on the ground, finding shows that people just don't find because they just don't go travel there, they don't have the patience or whatever. So we do this deal, and it's, oh, by the way, the major tool that you have to go out there and fly and be in South Korea to visit your daughter who's teaching in South Korea and stumble upon Grandpa's Overflowers, better late than never, you no longer can do. So like Elaine said, you know, from a creative standpoint, I can see where it's exhausting for us. 24 hours a day talking to our mates around the world, and what new shows have you got? We've got, you know, this MGM deal. One of the technological opportunities we have is the company that's bought a majority stake in us, Joe Lewis Company. They do live events, they do the pre-show Grammys and Oscars and Super Bowl. And needless to say, their business took the first hit, but we brought them the portal hologram business. So, and we've been working on this before COVID. So the phrase is, if you can't be there, beam there. So we're actually developing 3 different shows, you know, like Frank, your guy in South Africa, rather than doing a green screen, you know, Barack and Oprah interview or a Zoom call, you could, with this technology, and it's affordable, actually just beam him. We're working on a dating show right now, you know, which probably takes dating game to a whole new world. But the whole idea is you can use this technology with or without COVID. And we've been dealing with Wind to Bone on a project. We have a show with Martin Lawrence that's we're working on. But you know, with or without COVID, it's an advance that is necessary, because I think just from the cost and the security and the safety that made us accelerate this technology. It's still, when we come out of COVID, people are going to want to say, okay, I don't want to travel to London. You know, as much as it'd be great to go to the Soho House and see everybody, because you do need that energy. Our business totally relies, when we're at markets and stuff, it's nice to have drinks and snacks, but we really do rely on that energy and that feeling we get from ideas, from people. We miss that. But so anyway, so from our technology standpoint, so it's made me have to be a hell of a lot more scrappier.
From a production company standpoint, I think one of the biggest changes that will absolutely happen, it's happened already. I've talked to so many people about this. And again, this is an in the trenches thing, but it's not having editors stuck in a facility with 30 edit rooms lined up. This idea of the technology, which has now been super juiced in terms of being able to edit, and we have editors now in Pittsburgh and LA and in Brooklyn, and just talking and communicating. I don't know why an editor would ever want to come into an office again. Yeah. So I think that actually, because we're involved in a big real estate project for production companies, nonfiction production companies in New York, to move them to Long Island City. And I will say that is also reconfiguring the way a lot of production companies are viewing things like physical space and where they are, because 70% of the normal production company's office was usually taken up with edit rooms.
That's true. All of our WeWork submissions are over. All our days at WeWorks are over. So I also think what's interesting, though, to your point of, and then, sorry, Rachel, I'll be quick here. This is back to Elaine's point, is I'm in the middle of a big production and we're in post. It's a big docuseries for a streamer, but who's attached to a network. And let me tell you, my biggest challenge is misunderstandings between the directors, you know, the field team and the editor, where it's like, well, I thought you wanted this. No, I didn't. And we all have to get on a Zoom and clarify 1 or 2 simple ideas. I miss actually being in a room where you do, or building, or an office where it's like, you got to talk to your editor about this tweak. You got to run over to your story producers. You got to run to the, you know, the post team. I miss that, because the exhaustion of setting up Zooms to just clarify things and reiterate and communicate, because everyone needs that. I wonder if it's definitely put an onus on everyone to communicate well, but it's not the best use of people's times. Like, I've also had to do timeouts and said to everyone, no Zooms for 8 hours, because everyone has to work. We have to just work and stop.
Or think.
I think what everybody here is leaning towards is there'll be a hybrid. It won't exclusively be this. It won't exclusively, it'll be a whole brand new world. And because we're kind of running a little close out of time, I did want to just add another thing looking forward. As we think about what happens looking forward, cognizant of what happened this year. We talk about Zoom and technology and production and the impact of COVID. We talk a little about the kinds of IP formats that everybody's working towards. But I want to ask everybody as well, the events of last year also talked greatly about diversity, both gender diversity, ethnic diversity. How are you in your particular companies approaching that moving forward? Because to not approach it seems, well, tone deaf to where the world is going. And everyone here has a different point of view and a different perspective based on your business models. I think it'd be interesting for anybody watching this. How are your companies approaching all kinds of diversity moving forward?
Well, you want me to go first?
Whoever.
'Cause I'm the network. We're actually putting real metrics to place of behind the camera diversity. Certainly, the brand that I represent, A&E, had a lot of work to do, and we have been doing that work since before June, but in particular June, with the social change and like the conversation changing. And it's been illuminating, and it's been finding COVID shows that we can also put faces in front of have been easy a little bit, because then that means maybe hosting shows. But really what we've been doing is trying to, make sure that the people that are the decision makers are diverse and inclusive, and not just, it's all diversity, right? So you just said that, you said it in gender and ethnic diversity, but that's something I'll just say for A&E that we've been really take importance in, and have actually are challenging ourselves and holding ourselves to certain metrics to improve.
Great. Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's we've been very lucky that a lot of our programming has been diverse, and so what we've been putting out, we continue to sort of focus on that and focus on talent. I think for us, it's looking inward and how can we be better, both in staffing and in taking proactive initiatives. And I think as I look internally at our company and sort of around the industry, post-production and editors is an area that we need to focus more on, and we're trying to take steps to make sure that the post-production side is as diverse as sort of in front of the camera. So that's where we're looking inward and trying to make specific strides.
Yeah, we've set up a diversity inclusion group, which is sort of a really amazing group of people, because the volunteers have come from every level, and I think people have found that really valuable. And how we, again, what initiatives should we be doing? Can we be doing? Can we be doing everything differently? And it's not just about recruitment; it's about so many different ways we do business. Whether it's about, are we focusing too much on Christmas parties being all about drinking, and is that appropriate for some people who don't have that as part of their culture, for example? So I think there's lots of work, but also, we don't broadcast content. We're not a network. On screen is harder for us to change, but we can certainly influence it, and we're doing a lot of work on that. And I think the networks and producers have really taken this on and are doing a really great job. And I think that we're seeing a lot of really good things happening really quickly. More to do, but I think everyone's really taking it on. It's really good to see.
And our company, it's changing everything from the C-suite, the green lighters, because we have channels in Canada, we have Love Nature around the world. I just told Michael McMillan, who's our CEO, I'm like, you got to double up. You got to double in women. We got to double up in diversity. You got to get board members. And you know what? He's taking it on seriously. And I think all of us on this call, are taking it seriously. I'm loving, frankly, and I'm loving the fact that if you have long-term relationships with talent who frankly couldn't get through the door because of something, and you're able to open that door and say to them, we're not just doing a development, you're going to be running a show, whether it's show running, directing. I used to work for Robert Redford. He had a great line. You have to have artists at the table for every decision and every creative endeavor. Otherwise, what a shame. So I look at it that way. I want diversity, and I want this, this diversity, which is a beautiful thing and makes things work. And in our business actually you can do the metrics. It's successful. So I just look around my tables, and if they're not filled with the right, makeup, I'm like, wait a second, we might have to search a little longer, go a little further in our recruitment, but it's totally, it's totally just mandatory now. And I think many of us were doing it previously, but I think now it's the front and center conversation.
Right.
And I'm really glad networks say to us, what about diversity in front and behind the camera? I'm like, I'm glad you asked that. I'm glad you're asking that. So it's a good thing.
I was gonna pipe
We're
in.
down to 2 minutes.
I want to give a quick, but onto Laura's thing, she was responsible and humble that she is. Speaking of that topic, one of the most wonderful movies ever in the last year, the John Lewis Good Trouble. That wasn't listed in her credit, but that was such an inspiring movie. It inspired us to rethink the projects we're doing. So
Well, that's
yeah.
Don Porter, an amazing director
Don
producer.
Porter.
So, and Elaine knows her well.
Work at A&E with me.
Yes.
Well, listen, guys, I want to, on behalf of NATPE and Bruce, I want to start to say thank you because we are running out of time. I think we've had a nice, interesting discussion. We've talked about production budgets. We've talked about development money. We've talked about pro-social. We've covered both bases, all the bases, but we're all looking towards how our business will grow and evolve and everybody gets to survive and thrive. So continued success with your company, your brand.
Thrive.
And I think there's a dichotomy for this year. Is it going to be a sober time once COVID passes, or is it going to be the roaring 20s type vibe? And I know on behalf of everybody, we're hoping for the roaring 20s type vibe. And
I am.
Yep.
Most
That's it.
importantly,
Let's all say goodbye. We're being waved off.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Thank you to Phil, Bruce, and the entire amazing panel. That really was a fascinating conversation. And coming up next, we have an exclusive chat with Disney's Diego Lerner. So stay with us. We'll be right back after these sponsored messages.
You know, one thing I do, which editors find a bit annoying, and even cinematographers as well, but the actors love it. I do continuous takes, 7, 8 on the trot without cutting, but it keeps them in the moment. They love the energy whilst the teacups are being refilled and the cameraman's getting back to position 1. But the performances, they just get better and better in energy.
Amagi is a pioneer in cloud-based solutions for broadcast TV and streaming TV. We work with large broadcast networks, digital content owners, and OTT platforms, enabling them to launch broadcast-grade live linear channels, distribute and monetize content. Amagi is your reliable cloud technology partner in the US and around the world.